Hello, my name is Joris Malta.
And my name is Daniel Gross.
And the main theme of our presentation will be that data is not information, and information in turn is not knowledge.
And the special thing about information graphics is that you can zoom out to see a broader picture, but you can zoom in at the same time to see every single detail.
ขอแนะนำนะคะสองท่านแรกที่จะมาพูดคุยกับเราวันนี้นะคะก็ชื่อคุณยอริสมาลธาและคุณแดเนียลกรอสนะคะจาก Catalogtree Studio ค่ะซึ่งก็เป็นสตูดิโอนะคะที่ทำงานออกแบบหลากหลายสาขาจากเมืองอาร์เนมประเทศเนเธอร์แลนด์และกรุงเบอร์ลินนะคะประเทศเยอรมนีซึ่งก็จะเชี่ยวชาญนะคะด้านการออกแบบข้อมูลและสนใจระบบการจัดการตัวเองของคอมพิวเตอร์โดยเชื่อในความคิดที่ว่ารูปแบบเท่ากับพฤติกรรมค่ะ so Are you guys ready to start off this afternoon session with our first two speakers? If you are, please welcome Mr. Joris Malta and Mr. Daniel Gross from Catalogtree.
Hello. Let me put my bottle of water down first. First, I'd like to thank the TCDC for inviting us. It's been a wonderful stay so far, and especially we'd like to thank you for taking such good care of us these past few days. So we're Catalogtree. We're a very small graphics design studio based in Arnhem in the Netherlands, and we have a second studio in Berlin, which is led by Nina Bender, our third partner. And we specialize in what is called information design. We often get asked the question what it actually is. You know, isn't all graphic design information design? You know, if you design someone's business card, there's usually information on it, or if you design a poster, there's information on it. So what is the difference? When you work with data, something else comes in play. Because data is not information. And information, in turn, is not knowledge. We try to get to that later a bit. But when you want to get from data to information, you have to take certain editorial steps. You have to, let's say, reorganize the data. You have to filter it and make choices, editorial choices, in order to draw a story out of the data. In other words, we're not only concerned with the tone of voice of a project, let's say the stylistic aspects of it, you know, what is the colors that are being used, or the typefaces, or maybe the composition and things like that. But we're also concerned with what it is that we are actually saying. So our studio usually gets into projects where we get real early into a project, working together with other people. Not only discussing about what the end product might be, but also what is the content of the project. We will, of course, show some examples of that. But first, let me briefly explain what is flickering here on the screen. About a year ago, we were in São Paulo, in Brazil, and we quickly learned that São Paulo has the highest density of helicopter landing platforms in the world. There's more helicopter landing platforms or helipads in São Paulo than you have in the entire United Kingdom. There's a lot. And people told us that there's a whole new class of the super rich that fly into the city from outside and land on their office building, whatever. They go do a days of work, then go into their helicopter again, fly to the next building and go to the gym or do some shopping or whatever, what super rich people do at the end of the day, and then they fly out of the city again. So they don't touch the ground anymore. They're actually not on the street, never, because they're just flying with a helicopter. We were really interested in this. Well, yeah, we thought it was a fascinating story, so we thought maybe we can see a glimpse of that life, and we wanted to draw a map, and we couldn't find any maps or any lists of where these places were, and so we wrote an algorithm that can detect helipads from satellite footage, because we thought helipads are always square, and they're always blue, and they always have a white triangle. At the end of our talk, we would like to share our conclusions from that research. But cities are very interesting to us, and the urban landscape especially. You know, more than half of the people on this planet live in cities. and this number is growing rapidly. And to accommodate that massive migration that is taking place in the past 40 years, we've built as much urban fabric as we've done in the past 10,000 years of human history. So this is really complex. This is a huge issue that is going on. If we want to find answers to big global problems, you know, like climate change or poor distribution of wealth across the globe, maybe the best place to look for answers is cities, because that's where everyone is, you know. So recently, in recent projects, we've been able to work together with architects and city planners and researchers who are looking for answers in this direction. So one project that we'd like to start off with is this here. It's a part of an exhibition of the International Architectural Biennale in Rotterdam in 2014, where we looked at the city as a metabolism. So not so much as a place where there's buildings, but as a place of flows. People flowing in and out of the city, food flowing in and out, water, waste, air, cargo, energy, and try to create visuals around that. What does that actually look like? We designed a great many maps and infographics that show this a little bit, and it was part of this exhibition.
This was a book which accompanied the exhibition, and basically it's a selection of all infographics we did, and again with some text to explain these a little bit better. But the main challenge we faced here was the fact that all the source data was completely different, and still we had to make some choices that they communicate with the same tone. So, but in our opinion, it's one of the main challenges of information design in general, which is often forgot, that the data which is sourced to the information design is often completely inconsistent, incomplete, vague, fuzzy, or messy to the core. So this is a fact which is often forgotten if you look at the end on the infographic. So, but sometimes data is so complex and so complicated that it's not able to bring the message across. But as soon as it's clamped up, it's a little bit easier to understand. So this is one graphic we did for them. This is the Netherlands, basically. It may not look like, but it's it. So these are all energy flows through the Netherlands. So the thickness of the line is directly related to the amount of energy, and then there are different energy sources. So you have these fossil fuels, like oil products and crude oil, and the Netherlands are importing all this stuff. But at the same moment, they export it. So most of the oil is just floating through the Netherlands and crossing the border again. But if you take a closer look, and you look at these more sustainable energies like biomass, waste, geothermal energy, solar energy, and wind energy, and you follow their path, and you compare it here, in the Netherlands, we throw away 9 times more energy by throwing away still heated cooling water than all these sustainable energy sources added up. So this is quite a nice thing to know, but it was completely hidden underneath the data in start, because scientists are so used to communicate based on numbers and figures. But our task is really to visualize these, that they are able to tell a story. So these are some pages of the book where parts of the Netherlands are explained, and and here. So basically it came down that we are not doing only the infographics or the info design for the book, but to develop a kind of a language where all these different data sources can speak with the same tone, that they are understandable and capable of telling a story.
Right, so another book that we recently designed together with the curator of that exhibition, Dirk Simons, is about the transition of the generation of energy from fossil fuels to more sustainable sources, and the way that might impact our landscape and the urban landscape. This book has a very nice cover because it's very unsustainable glow-in-the-dark ink. It's a nice effect, isn't it?
But it really glows in the dark, right?
It glows in the dark.
Yeah.
So when we got it back from the printer, we instantly ran into the toilet and sort of closed the door behind us, and ooh, look at that. It glows in the dark, you know. It's fantastic. Anyway, so this, the yeah, you can tell me the joke later. Yeah? The idea behind this book is that that Dirk Simons and his company H&S Landscape Architects had is that they wanted to see what might happen to a polder in the Netherlands. The image you see there is a polder north of Amsterdam. If we were to generate energy in that space for 1 million homes. And they created these photo montages to show that. So what you see here on the left is the impact of nuclear energy on the landscape. And it's really not that much. It's really difficult to detect. But there's a little white plume. Yeah, can you point it out on the screen, Daniel? Here. Make the people of the lights nervous about whether to switch on or off the light. So there's a little dot in the landscape that indicates that there's a nuclear power plant. Of course, the geographical footprint of a power plant is not that problematic, but the waste that comes from it is problematic for many years. So maybe it would be better to switch to solar or wind power. And this is the image that you see on the right. From this height, you don't see any turbines. But there are other sources that have a huge impact on the landscape. Like here on the left, you see what the landscape might look like if you were to grow biomass to burn, basically, to create energy. You know, if you make a wood fire, you're burning biomass. And you need 9 times the size of that polder to generate energy for 1 million homes. And on the right-hand side, it's tar sand. It's sand that is saturated with oil, and then after a very polluting chemical process, the oil and the sand are separated, and then you have fuel to burn. But as you can see, this completely ruins everything. We added a graphic to that because 1 million homes isn't the same across the globe. You know, there's big differences between cities. As you can see here, the biggest circle is 1 million homes in Los Angeles, where the middle circle is 1 million homes in Istanbul, and the smallest is 1 million homes in Mumbai. So this means that well, of course we know that population density differs, but what is interesting to think about is that to generate energy for this population, sometimes you need much more space than these people actually occupy by living. And this is not only true for the generation of energy, but it also counts for growing crops, or maybe getting water, drinking water out of the ground. You need much more space than just a place where you're living outside. Then we work together with Nicolas de Monchaux. It's another atlas, the last one that we're going to show. It's actually a city atlas of 3 major American cities, New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. And the book shows research by Nicolas de Monchaux, who is an associate professor at Berkeley in California, and associate professor in architecture. The book was very recently, only 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, was published by Princeton Architectural Press in New York. And what Nicolas de Monchaux has done is not to come up with one big design that could change change these kind of issues for the better, but to look for very small spots in the city where you could make little changes. He looked for places that are underused, basically are abandoned by the city. No money flows there anymore for maintenance, so they're basically just left to ruin. He did this by collecting enormous amounts of data, not only geographical data about where those places might be, but especially demographic data and social data. Because as it turns out, these underused sites in cities are often embedded in the most vulnerable neighborhoods. So if you look for places where crime rates are high, or unemployment is high, or health figures are low, you're likely to find places that are underused. One example of that is spots like these, owned by billboard companies. This is in Los Angeles, a street scene in Los Angeles. And what the billboard company does is they buy a little plot of land next to a highway or a train line or something like that. And they fence it off, and they place a billboard there. And so many people can see it, but it's not used for anything else. And of course, this is only a little plot of land. If you look at that from above, it's really not that much. You can turn to the next. It's really not that much. It's just a little plot of land. But because de Monchaux collected so much data, he could identify thousands of these places. And not only, these are locations in Los Angeles, but he also detected thousands of heat islands in New York, for instance, and flooding areas in San Francisco. And because he knew so much, he knew so much about the surroundings, what kind of people live there and what are their needs, he could also predict or design a possible scenario for these locations. Maybe there should be a public park there, because it might be a site in New York that is actually a heat island, a place that would never cool down anymore in the summer, and where temperatures get so high that it actually has a really negative influence on public health. Or maybe there's educational issues or something like that, and it should be a public library. So all of these scenarios were generated dynamically, and now we have, all of a sudden, thousands of micro solutions for very small places. But because they're they're in such vulnerable neighborhoods, they can have a really big impact on these communities.
So for the book, de Monchaux made a really small selection of all his plans, about 4,000, and then asked us to design the book. But we only had 240 pages, so it was quite a lot to put on these pages, and he wanted to reserve about 100 pages for his own text, which give a more broad insight on the subject. So we decided to program the rest of the book, because otherwise it's a little bit too much work also for us. We are kind of lazy somewhat. And so we wrote an algorithm that is able to design the spreads automatically for us. So it's putting maps of sites where the impact is high, where the pressure also is high to change something, bigger on the spread than other ones. So it's making not only a selection, but it's also adding some weight to it. Because if we would have placed these with the same size each, it would be a very boring story to tell. And the algorithm also sorted these from west to east. So you can browse through the book, and by browsing through the book, you browse through the sites in a geographical correct way. So this then was automatically implemented, and this is how the book looks. At least the pages do look like with the maps on it. So maps where the pressure was high or it's a pressing problem are getting bigger, and other ones are getting smaller. So if you zoom in, you see these, and the captions are placed automatically, and we had different captions according to the size of the maps. Then these are the introduction pages Monchaux wrote to give a broader view. And the book is published right now. So it came out a month ago, right? It's on like Princeton Architect Press. And it's still an ongoing project. So it was also featured in Architectural Biennale Triennale in Portugal. And there's a website we made also for this project, and it's going on right now. What we want to show next is a picture we really do like. It's the Netherlands. It's a southern part of Netherlands, and it was shot around 2006. So it's an older picture. But what you can see here is it's a nice piece of design, but it's not designed by a designer actually. It was designed by a young man who has led here the sports car of his dad, and then he drank a lot of alcohol.
And cocaine, and cocaine. Don't forget
took
the
a lot
cocaine.
of drugs, and then just drove off, which is not really a good idea, of course. But quite soon he was, because of his driving style, he was followed by the police agents. And then the man had this almost ingenious idea to try to escape the police agents by entering a cornfield. So cornfields are quite high, so you can hide a car in it. And the man just drove on the cornfield and tried almost frantically to escape the police agents there. But what he didn't knew, and what the policeman knew, was that there was only one single exit. Oh, it's exit. It's but there was only one single exit, and they just stood there and wait. So actually, no person was purchasing or following the man anymore. But still, he drove there for about half an hour, and then came here, sweating all over, and drove the car into a ditch, caused total loss to his dad's car, was arrested by the police, and they drove off. But what remains was a kind of quite drastical damage to the field, but also, in our opinion, a really, really nice infographic. Because if people talk about infographics, they always quite fastly think about pie charts and bar charts and all these things. But there's an interesting thing about infographics. So as soon as you have correct data, if the data is reliable and well sorted, it's really easy to make an infographic. So you basically could draw a pie chart. But if the data is randomized, if it's fuzzy data, if it's unreliable data, it's really hard to find a fitting translation for that kind of data. So how would an infographic for paranoia look like, for example? That's a really hard answer to a question to answer. And we think this is a perfect infographic, for example, paranoia. So it's made by, and even better, it's made by a non-designer without knowing that he's designing anything. So it's,
get the designers out. That's
So we knew that picture, and years later we were asked to do an exhibition design for Vitra Design Museum in Germany. And they had the idea to make an exhibition and to ask Dutch product designers to collaborate with German firms. And at that time, when the project started, we imagined basically chaos. Because if you ask a Dutch product designer to collaborate with somebody else in Germany, for example, and it could end in chaos, and we were proven, right. So it's so we tried to come up with a fitting translation of chaos, basically. So we didn't want to make them a kind of nice-looking logo, but we wanted to have a nice translation of chaos. So we also did some.
Do you want to do the honors?
So
and we want to have more of Yuri in this room because we're very sorry that he's not here. And so
we also did some really rapid prototyping. So it's so because we knew about a nice experiment to show chaos, and I want to share this with you right now. So where's the camera? Yeah, I showed you. And so this is a pendulum, right? It's really easy. So if the pendulum swings, even for us, it's quite easy to predict where the pendulum will be in the next second. So because it's harmonic and so on. It's quite easy. But if you attach a second pendulum to the first one, you get a double pendulum. And then you get a kind of It does not work at all, but it's showing the principle. The movement gets chaotic. So you're not able to predict even the next second of the movement of that pendulum. Because it's complete chaos. But the good thing about it is that you're not able to predict it, but you can program it. So, and this is what we did. We made a. Oh yeah, you have to go wait.
Oh, we have to wait for the slide.
Could we switch back to the yeah?
Hang on.
So if you imagine these two red dots you see right now as these two euro coins here and here, you get a pattern like this. But every time you start this animation again, it's creating a completely different pattern. But the nice thing about that one is that all these patterns kind of look like the same, but they are not. They are family of each other, but they are not the same. And these patterns we used for all their print campaign. So every time they had something to print, we used different logo. So because it's not one logo, there are thousands or more than that. But because it's Vitra, and we were a little bit dissatisfied that they asked us for the exhibition design because we wanted to do something. We also started to make a mechanical device which is showing that principle. So we made this clock, and it's a normal gear clock basically, and you have to wind it up. So we have these Swiss Zig bottles, and they are filled with lead. And you have to wind up the clock. So it's, as you can see here, it's the upper part of the clock. And then if we take a look at the film, so here you see the double pendulum, the next pendulum, and the weights. But the interesting thing about that clock is because the pendulum itself is moving chaotically, and the pendulum in every proper gear clock is synchronizing the clock. You never know if this clock is running right or if it's running wrong. So every time you look at the clock, you can read the time, but you do not know if it's right or wrong. And
handy,
huh?
Which is really handy.
Yeah. It's a little bit the same than when refrigerator. So if you open the door, the light is on inside, but you do not know if it's on before. And and when we this was because we also did the exhibition design for their show, we made this the centerpiece of all. And you see here it's a pendulum, and here's the second one. And we are not really interactive designers, but this was by far the most interactive piece we did ever, because the clock is always running wrong, right? But maybe it's running exactly right. But there were always men standing here fiddling the clock hands to make it run right, so it was damaged after a week. But still, we really do like this this device because it's nice to show that kind of principle. Okay. But so, we also do some print design we want to show now.
Yeah, and also we want to have a little break ourselves. So let someone else do the talking then.
Hey everybody, I'm Trish from Fold Factory and welcome to the 200th episode of Fold of the Week. I cannot believe I've been doing 50 episodes a year for 4 years. It's hard to believe. It's kind of gone by in a flash. You know, it's very funny, much like my 100th episode, there's a lot of pressure to do something really exciting and interesting for my 200th episode. Do I throw confetti? Do I go platinum blonde and surprise everybody? I don't know. Well, I decided to just, you know, keep it real and do what I do best and show a really amazing format for my 200th episode. And this one is epic. It's off the hook. It's one of the neatest things I've ever seen. I'm going to give you a few quick stats and then I'm going to tell you all about it. This is for University of Toronto's School of Architecture. This was designed by Catalogtree in the Netherlands and also produced in the Netherlands. Paper is Pioneer 80-pound text. and they did about 3,500 of these. This folding style is called the Mura or Ri. I have never seen it in commercial application. I've only seen this as concepts in white paper, basically, mock-ups and things. So I was absolutely floored to see this in application, and it's fascinating. So here's how it works. So this is what it looks like when it's closed. Okay, and the nature of this fold, I'll give you a little history, but is that it opens in one smooth movement and closes in one smooth movement into a poster, basically. So watch this. Take a look at that. I'm going to show you the back because it's a little easier to see the folded, where the folds are and the scores. But it's wonderful, too, because this was for a school of architecture, and that was part of the concept behind why they used this format. So it just closes up in one movement as well. So cool. So a little bit of history on this. This folded format was created by and named after a Japanese astrophysicist. It was developed specifically for solar panel arrays on Japanese satellites. And it's actually called rigid origami when they use rigid materials and hinges to mimic the movement of paper. And so when you apply, they applied this to solar panels, but then they also can apply it to paper. So just fascinating. So these were printed, scored, hand-folded. As I said, they did 3,500 of them. Just amazing. This is part of a poster series, actually, that they produced at University of Toronto. I just think it's one of the most amazing formats I've seen. So I hope you like it. That is your 60-second super cool Fold of the Week. I want to take a moment to thank my longtime sponsors of Fold of the Week, Sappy Fine Paper. I don't know what I would do without them. They're a wonderful company. I also want to thank all my Fold Factory sponsors for supporting me and for all my viewers who come back every week and share my videos. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching. So 60-second Fold of the Week, Mura or Ri. Forward this to your friends and colleagues. Keep the dialogue going. And viewers, please send me your folds. If I use them, I'll send you free stuff. Visit foldfactory.com for more ideas and inspiration. And remember, think finishing at the beginning. I'll see you next week. Bye.
Yeah. Maybe invite her next time. Yeah. So, Nat, at which episode is she now? At 362, right?
67.
67. It's incredible. That's Trish Witkowski. She's doing this forever. Sorry to the translator. She were not prepared for that little add-on. All right. Geez, we're really fast now. We're already up to our last project that we want to show.
Talk really slow.
Yeah, we will talk really slow. So this video was taken by a friend of ours, Hans Gremme, very nice graphic designer from the Netherlands, and he was traveling by car in the U.S. and he told us that he was in Mahwah in New Jersey, which is up north from New York City, and we said, oh yeah, if you're there, can you go and film the New York Stock Exchange for us? Because it's there. The building that you just see over the greens over there, that's actually the New York Stock Exchange. There's no plate saying that. There's nothing that indicates that the New York Stock Exchange is in Mahwah in New Jersey. Even if you would call the New York Stock Exchange and say, what's your address? They would never give you this particular location. It's it's not so much classified, but they're not really open about it. And we wanted to, or we were interested in this because we were working on a project at that time about high-frequency trading. We were working together with a documentary maker, Marije Meerman from the Netherlands, and she's working there for Dutch public television. And she had been working in the field of making documentaries about the financial world. And her next project she wanted to do on high-frequency trading. We thought, Daniel and me, not completely being oblivious about the financial world and what stock trade actually is, thought that this is what stock trading is. This is Wall Street, an image of Wall Street, and that stock trade goes as follows: you put on a funny colored jacket, and you're full of testosterone, and then you start shouting your orders and be really stressed and make a lot of money. But we quickly learned that Wall Street is actually a museum. There's hardly any trading going on there anymore because all the trading is being done by computers. Right? There's algorithms that decide when to buy your share or sell stock. This has major consequences to the way things work in the world, because the computers that run these algorithms aren't your everyday PCs. They're really, really expensive big machines that literally only a handful of companies in the world can afford. And this means that the majority of trading is controlled basically by a very, very small amount of people, which is a bit of a disconcerting thought to us. Another thing that is changing because of this development is that when you hear about, emotions in the market, like there's uncertainty or there's fear or something like that, it's only partially true because the algorithms don't care. They just figure out or try to figure out when to buy or sell stock. They have no emotions. Another thing is that it is tremendously fast. When we were doing this project, the speed was about 3,000 transactions a second, which is 1,000 times faster than you can blink your eye. And by now, they're doing this by 6,000 transactions a second or something like that. So the documentary was to be an interactive documentary special for iPad, which was not released at that time in the Netherlands, but we still wanted to do something for this. It's a 60-minute documentary that you can download and has all kinds of add-ons. And we wanted to explain this. How does high frequency work, actually? But then, on May 6th in 2010, there was a flash crash on the Dow Jones in America, one of the indexes. And in 7.5 minutes or something, $800 billion were lost, which is like the economy of a reasonable country. Sort of in 7 minutes, it was gone. And then after 20 minutes, it sort of gradually came back. But when that happened, and we were right in the middle of this project, we thought, no, this is what we should try to talk about. This is what we should do. So Marije Meerman, the documentary maker, she went out to London and New York to interview traders and analysts and who were witnesses of this event that day. And we were giving the actual tick data of all the trades that were going on, or not all of it, because then you would need one of those gigantic computers. But from specific shares, we were given the full data of the entire day, so we could make visualizations about this. And this led then to this app that we created. We want to show a small clip to give you a bit of an idea of the atmosphere of the documentary.
Where are you on May 6, 2010?
Here working.
May 6, 2010. Yes, I was here.
One eye on the market, one eye on my own profits and losses, and then my ears and mouth doing whatever else they have to do.
It was the first really down day that we had in a while.
And the market's basically looks like it's going to go to hell that day.
It wasn't just minutes later. It was Armageddon.
Oh my God.
Here you go. I'm told it's 835. The Dow ticker. Wow.
I feel like when the Dow hit nearly down 1,000 points, you're like, really?
87 even start trading. 86 even start trading. 85 even start trading. Here now, guys. All the
I saw that panic. I think then I started watching CNN or one of those.
What we're seeing right now, I mean, I believe maybe unprecedented. You're not talk about capitulation. Let's take a look at P&G.
They're going to probably halt trading. We can't stop the selling.
So you've got the general picture, the big picture, although it's still over a very short time scale, and then you've got the detailed picture of the individual trades. See, there's a little bump there. That's almost the more natural scale, whereas even here at this level, it's something that seems to be quite big. So there are some trades that are kind of normal, and then there's yes, funny, these big, you're right, these are really big, aren't they? This one goes, it starts off at 42 and it goes all the way down to 1 cent. Lord above, it's amazing.
Oh my gosh, I turned away when that happened. So who is it selling Accenture at 5 cents?
It has to be a machine, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, they're just rocketing back and forth between.
Yeah.
Only a machine can do those, right?
Any thoughts of what's going on here?
Steve Jobs didn't die. There's no reason for Apple to be falling to zero.
Right.
And so they start trading, and then, I mean, the back up in, 7.5 minutes or something, it was incredible. And that couldn't have been people not reacting that quickly and not in that kind of volume.
Well, one key thing is how automated is all of this, all of these trades.
And that's when the delay started a few hundred milliseconds, and then a few seconds, and then 5 seconds, and then 10 seconds. And then some of them went all the way to 36 seconds.
So the delay in the data was 36 seconds.
Right, but the way that the timestamps occur is it hid the delay, so you couldn't see it.
The Dow Jones, it was actually should have been here. The real price was here. The delay in the system caused it to appear like it was over here. So when people were seeing the Dow dropping, this was actually really where the market was at that moment in time.
We operate on this time scale where, where 5 minutes is pretty fast. You could go out for a cup of coffee and come back and find that you'd lost $1 billion. That would ruin your day. And yet for these computers operating in microseconds, it makes no difference. So I think it's the circuit breakers is a case of sort of imposing our time scale on the computing time scale.
Could it happen again?
The same mechanism that caused it on May 6th is still there.
Yeah, so it happens again and again, but then not at that magnitude. So every week or so or every month, you see these little dips, and what goes on is that many shares are sold very, very rapidly, causing a little delay in the system, and by that, the same share can be has different prices in different platforms. So you can buy it if you have a really fast computer. You can buy it for a low price and sell it for a high price instantaneously. So that's someone is making money with that system. But what we did with this documentary, there's all these interviews and everything in it, but the visualizations that we created were already finished before the entire app was finished. So when Marije did those interviews, she could take them with her and have these experts discuss them and try to explain what is going on. And maybe this ties in a little bit with what we said earlier, that data is not information and that information is not knowledge, is that when you have the information, that doesn't really mean that you understand it, right? If you know that Wikipedia is full of information, that doesn't exactly make you wise. You still have to invest time and make an effort to understand. And this is what we were able to do, is that we could have the experts talk to you while you were watching these animations. Another thing is on a more technical level is that, of course, we had the entire day of data, and you cannot really ask people to download an entire day of video from the App Store, right? So what we did is that we only uploaded the actual data, and any animations were created on the fly. We think that is really cool, but everyone else always thinks, yeah, well, so what? But we really like that. The fact that you can do that. So here's Procter & Gamble in turmoil.
This is an aerial view, which is a little bit older, and it's showing exactly the same location we have shown in the beginning, and it's a New York Stock Exchange in Mahwah, New Jersey, and basically it's there to provide a kind of real-time backup for all things which are happening there. So this place at that time was still empty. So you see this vacant place, and this is the location Goldman & Sachs used for their data center. So they built it right next to their data center, And the only reason was that their cable is a little bit shorter. So because if you do have a shorter cable, the information arrives a little bit earlier. So this is kind of a strange phenomenon, which leads to a strange cartography. So here you see Wall Street in the center, and the red one is Manhattan Island, and you see this black shape around it, and it has a name. It's called a data donut because it is a hole in the middle, and this is the area where all the data centers are built right now. The outer rim is about 70 kilometers away from the center, and the inner rim is about 30 kilometers away from the center. The outer rim is because the glass fiber network gets too slow. When there are data centers built outside that area, it's not really a real-time connection anymore. And the inner rim, because it's a donut, the hole, is because they have to take into account that there might be a nuclear attack happening on Manhattan. So you do not want to have your data center built inside the blast radius of an atomic bomb. So that's a reason why, which is kind of abstract to think about like that. And then there are even more things which make it a little bit difficult to build a data center. For example, if there are a lot of trees in it, if it's a swampy area, if it's flooding zones, if there are rivers nearby, if there are streets nearby, because hazardous goods could be transported there, if there are railway lines nearby, if you have your data center underneath a flight route, and there are 3 major airports, so there are a lot of flight routes also. And if you do not want to build your data center next to a nuclear power plant, so there's one in the south and one in the north, and you do not want to build it in places where the crime rate is quite high. So what remains darkish or black right now inside this rim is it's sold very, very expensive. So these places which stayed black, this is a kind of digital Dubai for all real estate managers to sell these places, because they do fulfill on every single aspects you want to have for a data center. And these firms built their data centers there, and then they built a second one next to it as a backup for the backup. And some firms do quadruples, so they build 4 identical data centers at the size of the one as a stock exchange, where the other one can be switched on when the rest is damaged or is faulty.
But only the really rich companies do that, no? Yeah. So this is an example of a visualization that did not make it into the app. It just remained a sketch. And what we heard was that there was a rumor that this crash was originated by some bad trade or something like that on a platform in Chicago. So what you see here on the screen is all the trading floors in Northern America, and we wanted to visualize this somehow like you throw a rock in the water or something, and then the rigs spread out, and we were hoping to maybe discover some type of pattern in that. So I think that the green stands for when the stock goes up, and the red stands for when the stock goes down, or something like that. And the magnitude of the ring was the volume of the trade, or whatever. I can't even really remember. But what I do remember was that we programmed this quickly just to see, and then we were sitting at the screen, sort of, oh, that's really beautiful. And sort of looking at it, oh, this is so beautiful. Ah, it's really good, and we were so happy with this. You know, we made such a beautiful thing. Like, oh, this is really good. And then after, I don't know, half an hour or so, maybe we got a little bit hypnotized. Also, I don't know what it was, but after half an hour, we thought, yeah, but so where's this bad trade? You know, where's this story? And we just couldn't find it. I mean, we made other visualizations after this and tried to draw this story out, and we just couldn't do it. And this is to sort of illustrate this point that even if you have the data, you can. It's not necessarily the case that there is any interesting story in it, It's even if the quality of the data is very high, and we had the highest grain of data that you could get on this subject, like tick data, every single transaction with all the information that you can get. We couldn't draw anything out. And then you can stick with the beauty, sort of, and say, yeah, it doesn't mean anything, but it's really beautiful, or you have to kick it out. It's the last thing that we did. So we kicked it out. And we're still thinking about turning this into a screensaver or something like that for people to download for free. Apple Trade number 900, whatever it is. So, but we're really near the end of our talk. So we wanted to go back to this helipad algorithm, and it was of course also detecting swimming pools and roofs that are bluish but not helipads. We should have asked Kyle McDonald to program it for us. We didn't have the resources, Kyle. maybe next time, or you could help us out with this. Yes, there's tennis courts that are blue.
But there are a lot. There are a lot of tennis courts.
Oh yeah. There's plenty of tennis courts. Also, it was missing out on many of these things. So the only reasonable thing that we could say after doing this exercise is basically this: that there at that time were 2,165 bluish objects in São Paulo, and then we discovered that some of them are red. So thanks a lot. That's it for us.
Since there should be an editorial process in turning information into knowledge, how can we be sure that we draw the right conclusion from the information?
Yes, yeah. This is, of course, yeah. If you talk about data visualization, you often get this into a conflict with the objectivity. You could say that a data set should be represented as objective as possible. We tend to not agree with that so much. It might work for a small data set. If you have a top 10 of best-selling books or something like that, you better keep it just simply as a list, like that. But if you have a really large data set, we think that line of thinking really drives at reproducing the exact data set again. And if you have tens of thousands of data points, this makes interpretation really difficult. So you're Donald Trump.
They're talking to you.
You're sort of standing behind me the whole time. So that makes interpretation really difficult. You have to take the audience with you and sort of point at certain things and say, this is really important, you have to pay attention to this. But what we try to do in our visualizations is to still keep that an open system, so that you can interact with it in a very open way, or we don't oversimplify things, for instance. So you still need a little bit of time, you still need to invest a little bit of time in it, read it, in order to draw your own conclusions. And this is really what we want to do with our work, is that you can take it in and then draw your own conclusions from that.
Could you please elaborate on the differences of graphic design and information design, the bottom-up process of information design?
Daniel?
Your turn.
Yeah, it's a while ago we did some infographics for American Express, and we had a 60-page contract to sign that we do not mess up with the data. And because there's a basic difference between graphic design and information graphics, that you are in information graphics or data visualization, you are linked or bound to the data which is underneath. So, for example, if you make an area chart for a company for their annual report, and it's going well, but the form or the shape of the area of the area chart looks ugly to you as a graphic designer, it would not be a good idea to change the shape. So you really get into problems with that. So I think this is one of the biggest difference, because every single element, like type maybe even, or color or shape, has its own meaning. So and once you have set the rules for the game, you cannot change these things, because otherwise it's getting completely unreadable. So this might be one bigger difference.
Keeping chaos theory in mind, when do you believe you have enough data to satisfy your curiosity?
I think there's a big difference to enough data to satisfy our curiosity, or our computers are capable of. So if the data is complete or not is a really difficult thing to tell. So it's sometimes we during the process we learn that we got the wrong data. So and then we have to go back to the beginning and start again to do it. And sometimes the data which was sent to us, for example, to make an infographic or something, is faulty in some way. So a time ago we had a project where it's a really nice theory that in supermarkets, products where you can get a lot of calories for a low price are placed convenient, so that you can get in a lot of calories for a low price while entering the supermarket, American supermarkets.
Especially, yes.
Yes, and it really does sound good. But and so we asked them for the data and asked them for blueprints of Walmart and different supermarkets. And then we calculated the calorie-dollar ratio for every single product. And then we mapped it on the supermarket as a kind of a heat map. And it simply was not true. So it's not true, because there are products where you can get no calories for a lot of dollars, like Fuji water, which is really expensive, and there are other ones which are really cheap, but you can get no calories at all. So and then it's really complicated, because then we would go back into to start the process again. But since it was for a newspaper or a magazine, they had no time. And the story was written already. So he said, yeah, we do know. It's not right, but just make the infographic. And we said, yeah, but it's not right. So and then they mailed back and say, yeah, then just make it 3D. And we said, yeah, but it does not matter how many dimensions we are using. It stays wrong. So it's. And the next emails we got were with caps lock on. So it's and then we gave back the assignment, because it's getting a little bit complicated, because they asked to tell something which is not completely right. So it's.
You have mentioned that autonomy is an important quality in the process of your work. Any suggestions for the students who will enter the industry on how to maintain the autonomy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the autonomy of the designer, I suppose. Then I think that there's also autonomous processes within the design process itself. In our practice, we work a lot for clients, but we also do our own free work. We haven't the clock might sort of categorize in that, or might be categorized like that a little bit. But there's other projects that we frequently do, or at least a few a year, where we work on something that is not related to to a client or money, or we have no use for it even. We made a wooden table this last summer, for instance, because we felt like it, and we do is. Yeah, it was really nice carpentry work, and the weather was good. It's really important to us, because when we design, many of the designs that we do are based on a conversation that we have. We used to work in separate locations. Now we have a location in Berlin and one in Arnhem. But Daniel was once living in Rotterdam, and we were also separate there. And we were designing over the phone, basically. So discussing a book design is over the phone is really difficult sometimes, even especially if you try to be as detailed as possible, about the kerning of headlines and things like that. So this algorithmic designing, where you basically talk about the process, not so much about what the actual the final result might look like, is easier over the phone. But you need a certain vocabulary to do that. You need to understand each other and speak the same language. And I think that in our studio we do this really well. We have our own language, but if you have only so many words, I think that there's a risk of creating the same design over and over and over again, because you're constantly saying the same things to each other, and you need to refresh that. You need to talk about, you know, things like that you never worked with before, like wood, for instance, and try to carpent a table out of that when you're not a carpenter. So to step out of that, step out of your normal routine work. In our case, that tends to be the projects that are not for clients, because clients have deadlines and they have, you know, plans with your work. They spend money on you, so you have certain obligations, and free work just doesn't have all that. You can just do whatever you want, and this is something that we both teach in Arnhem at our TES, and we really encourage students to do this. Everyone wants to go into a job or maybe start their own practice, but we also tell them to, you know, do their own work on the side, basically. Yeah.